What is your take? What are your techniques for listeners who are actually trying to make this leap of faith but don't have that safety net from your parents?
The first thing to do is focus on reducing your monthly expenses.
Did you find friends when you were like at lower levels of entrepreneurship, or is it like they say that it's all the high level people are on the mountain and you find them when you climb up, basically?
Some of them become very successful and some of them don't, right?
So how do you deal with that woman in the red dress in the Matrix movie syndrome? Like to just, not get distracted every time something new comes out.
I'm interested in this problem. I think I'm the right person to solve this problem. Once you have all this information, you need to go full focus on that and then stop getting distracted.
Okay, so welcome to the podcast. Could you shortly introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. And my name's Kimeshan. So I'm a tech entrepreneur. I'm the co-founder of Unibuddy, which is an EdTech company. I grew it to 4 million users and raised over $35 million over multiple funding rounds, including a Series A and Series B. And I just started a new B2B SaaS company, which is AI driven, and it's in the hospitality sector called Familiar. So this is what I do. I love founding tech companies. I love building products and figuring out what customers want to be able to then scale that and provide value.
So software is your life, basically.
Yes. So I wrote my first line of code when I was 13 years old, sitting in South Africa. Learned it basically self-taught from an ebook that I found online. And ever since, I've just fell in love with it. So I've been doing it for over 20 years.
Nice. Okay, so now we know who you are, but I would like to go back to your roots and develop your story gradually so viewers get to know you and basically just to see this whole story from your perspective, not from perspective of where you are right now. So my first question to you is, from what I know about your background, that you come from a pretty small town with maybe people who didn't see this path you undertook as the best one. So could you tell me a bit more about relationship with your parents? When did they start believing that you are successful, and what was it like in the beginning?
Yes, definitely. So I grew up in a small sugarcane farming town in South Africa on the East Coast. It's called Tongaat. The history is just, sugarcane plantations, and there's a mill. So pretty much everyone there originated as a farmer. And my parents were government workers. My dad was a teacher in school, a high school teacher, and my mother was a police officer. So, pretty normal family, middle class, not very wealthy, didn't own our own business. Parents never started a business or really understood entrepreneurship. And when you come from that background and you don't have role models who are successful entrepreneurs, it's quite difficult because you don't even know that's a potential path to success, right? And that's something that took a lot of time, because if the people around you don't see that as a path to success, they won't encourage you to do it. So I was encouraged to get a job, to study something that could get me a job, and take that safe and secure route that guarantees you a secure job with a salary. And it makes sense when you come from that background, because your parents don't want to see you on the street. Your parents don't want to see you doing something that's risky. You lose everything, and then you can't afford to have a shelter over your head. And I had to build up that risk appetite by finding new mentors, to be honest. I had to read books. I had to see that, hey, it's possible actually to start your own business, to create something and become successful and make money from it and add value to the world and do something creative and build something from scratch. And ultimately, I'd say, to answer your question, the only way you convince or prove your parents or family or anyone in your community that this is a viable path is to show them that it's working, to show them that you're building a business, that it's starting to make money, that they see that, hey, there's revenue coming through here, that you're able to pay yourself a salary. Investors are investing, so obviously they have faith. So someone who's put in money into your company, they believe in it. So then your parents start going, okay, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's potential. People are putting money in it. There's revenue. Customers are paying them. He's able to pay himself a salary through this. So it is a viable path, because it's not like, you know, you have to get a job and work for someone else in order to get these things and to have a salary. So ultimately, I would say it's better to show than tell. You can sit there all day, try to convince someone, try to tell them, but the proof is in the pudding. Show them that it can work, show them the revenue, show them the investors, show them the product, show them your customers. That's that's the tried and trusted way to convince anyone that something can work.
And buying your parents a good car, I think, is also.
Yeah, if you can buy them a good car or a house or anything that make their life better. To be honest, I also find that's one of the most rewarding things you can do, right? Because I feel like your parents obviously give you a lot and sacrifice a lot for you, and when you get older, you want to do something for them. So it's always a great feeling if you could then do something to make their life better as well.
Okay, that was very, very insightful. So basically, show not tell, and yeah, that's very cool. So from what I know about your background, so you've studied electrical engineering and you even got a master's. So the thing I want to say is that you're academically, like you didn't drop out of high school and basically just went with one bag to the street and tried to make it. Like you somehow went to this path. And you also worked on an oil ship, and in one of your videos you talked about that whole experience. So could you elaborate a bit more about your academic path? How did it build up into your career, and when was the turning point? How did you get there?
Yes, and firstly, I would kind of preface this by saying people often want to know, should they drop out of high school? Should they drop out of university and start a company? I would say anyone who tells you to do one thing over another, they're probably being dishonest, because if you look at successful entrepreneurs, you have a wide range of backgrounds and paths. There isn't one path to it. You don't have to drop out of university to be a successful engineer. You don't have to go to university to be a successful engineer. You could go to university, you can drop out of university, you can drop out of high school, you can go to high school and still become a successful engineer. There's so many different paths and routes, and you need to think about what's right for you. So for me at the time, I didn't know I wanted to become an entrepreneur. When I was 13 years old writing code, I knew I wanted to write code and build products. So I studied engineering, I studied computer science, and then, to be honest, at the time, my dream was to like become an engineer and work for Google or a big company. Because at the time, this was like, 2010s, 2012, 2013, the internet was still a bit newer. You didn't have AI like it is today. You don't have as many big tech companies. I would say the coolest tech company was Google. And Google is still a big company, but it's lost a lot of that kind of coolness that it had, 10, 15 years ago. I don't think it's like the coolest company now, because it's seen more like an older company and a bigger company, more bureaucratic. But back then it was like the cool company, very innovative, very exciting. And they were making very, very exciting, innovative products and moving very quickly. So, in all honesty, I wanted to become an engineer and work for a cool startup or a cool company. The path to entrepreneurship just happened because while I was studying computer science in London, I met my co-founder, and he came to me with an idea, and then we said, okay, let's try to build this. So I kind of stumbled into it, and it started with just identifying a problem together with a co-founder or on your own, and then going, okay, let's try to solve this problem and let's try to build something and see what happens. And I think that's really important for people to understand, that it's not this pre-planned thing where, sometimes in the movies you see like you come up with this business plan and then you're pitching investors in a fancy like suit and in a pitch competition or something like that. It's much more organic. It kind of, you need to just speak to people, start exploring, throw things on the wall, expose yourself to problems. And it will gradually happen that you get into something and you're like, okay, this is worth trying to solve and trying to build something. And let me at least spend a few months working on this. And that's how it happened for me.
So just to back things up a bit. So you went to university, you found your co-founder, you started getting some initial traction, but then you started working at an oil ship, or was it before that? Like I got lost a bit in your story.
Oh yeah, so I completed my undergraduate degree. So I studied engineering for my bachelor's
Okay.
in Cape Town, South Africa. I graduated. I finished that when I was 20 years old, and that's when I started working in the oil industry as an electrical engineer. And this was on an oil ship, mostly in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi. And I did this for about 3 years. I'd say that experience taught me a couple of things. One was I didn't really like corporate, and I felt like I wasn't creating anything and I wanted to create things. I did learn some useful skills. For example, things like SOPs or standard operating procedures, how to work with other people, how to give feedback, how to take feedback from your manager. You end up doing a lot of training courses. Big companies, you do learn some skills. So it's not like I wouldn't say never work for a big company. Like things like standard operating procedures, documenting SOPs and how to do things. If you build a startup and it succeeds and it starts to scale, you end up needing to do a lot of those things. And that's why startups often end up needing to hire people from big companies, especially on the operations sides, like a COO or a chief of staff or a chief of operations, those kind of things. It becomes important once you're scaling. And often people from big companies bring that skill. So I learned a lot of skills, but I did realize that for me, I just felt I needed to create something. I wanted to be in a startup. I wanted to be working in a smaller team and being understanding the whole machine. Because that's something I realized working for a big company. I was like this little cog in the machine doing one thing because you specialize from early on in a big company, but you don't really see the whole system. And I would say that's the disadvantage in working for a big company is that you become good at very one thing, but you don't see the whole system. If you work in a startup, it's kind of the opposite. You probably don't become very good in one thing because you're doing so many different things, but you see the whole system and it trains you better to become a founder because you see what's needed to take something from an idea all the way to production to selling it, and you develop all these skills. So if I had to advise, what is the best experience to become a startup founder? Work for a startup. Work for a small startup. Ideally, it's less than 10 people because then you will see all the different parts, how to start with an idea, how to design it, how to spec it out, how to translate that into tickets, how it gets coded, how it gets QA'd, tested, launched, how to get customer feedback, how to sell, how to improve the product, how to upsell, how to grow the team. You'll be involved in interviews, in hiring. There's 100 different things that you'll be exposed to in a startup that you won't be exposed to in a corporate unless you stay at a corporate for a very, very long time and you go up the ladder and all of that.
Mm-hmm. But also, in some of your videos, you mentioned about like being like throwing up in there, like feeling a bit like maybe depressed. Like, what was the turmoil inside? Because you told right now like a very high view, but what were you feeling day to day, which made you take that leap?
It's a good question. And I always say people will leave a job because of push factors or pull factors, right? Or both. So push factors is where you're in a job and there's a lot of things you don't like. Maybe you have a manager or a boss that's, really, really not great to you, or, just not a nice person. And you go to work and you hate it every day. So that's a big push factor. That's going to push you away. Pull factors are better opportunities, or you have an idea and you want to start a company, or you see a better company out there with a better culture and things that pull you towards it. I would say for me, it was two things. One big push factor was the lifestyle working in an oil ship was very tough. You are quite isolated. You are on a ship for weeks at a time. So I was there often 5 weeks or even 7 weeks. So like a month, 2 months. There's only about 20 or 30 crew members on the ship. So you're living for a month or two with just 20 or 30 people in a confined space. You're working 12-hour days, 7 days a week. So it's physically grueling. You don't network, you don't develop your relationships like you do when you're in a big city or at home. You're not meeting friends, you're not able to go to events, you're not able to meet other people in the community. And you realize that's really important. So it's very isolating being at sea. So that was a big push factor for me. Yes, physically grueling in terms of like adapting, seasickness, feeling all of that. It takes its toll. And one big push factor was the isolation and the environment. And the other big push factor was it being very corporate and feeling like I was maintaining existing systems instead of creating them. So two big push factors. And then the pull factors was I just felt I wasn't doing what I could be doing and what I was meant to be doing in a way. Because as I said, I was writing code since I was 13 years old. I love to build stuff. I love to create stuff. And I wasn't able to do that in the oil industry. I was, maintaining systems, deploying equipment, um, measuring electrical signals and looking at data, but all very, very maintenance driven tasks, not creating anything new, not creating any new product. And a big pull for me was I wanted to do that. I wanted to start something, I wanted to create something, and I wanted to keep learning. I also felt like I'd stopped learning in a corporate.
And do you think that this isolation, lack of creativity, lack of socializing led to self-improvement in a way? Because as I understand, you started like developing ideas, reading books, like.
Yeah, I would say if you want to make the leap and make the change, you need to put in the work to prepare yourself for it. So I knew that if I had to leave, a corporate engineering job and start a company or work for a tech company, I needed to build those skills. So what I did in my spare time was get better at coding, get better at building products. So I also worked on a few like freelance projects where I had some friends that were full-time programmers. They had some projects that they didn't have the time for. So they actually brought me in and I did some work. Like I remember one project was writing a Python script to pull some data from Mixpanel, some analytics, and provide that to a client, and I got paid like a couple $100. It wasn't a lot of money, but allowed me to build my skills up and deliver something to a client and realize that, hey, there's a market for this out there as well. Like software is growing, there's a demand for programmers for coding, and it was a good time to make the switch.
So if I understand your story correctly, you approached this problem intelligently because you went to pursue masters, so you would change your environment. Yes, that's what happened. And you, after that, like, did you have like some initial business ideas you wanted to do, or did you plan to just change your career path a bit and go to work at Google or something like that, like you told me before?
Yeah, great question. I would say if you're trying to make a career change, like I was from electrical engineering to software engineering, one of the easier ways to do it is through studying. Because one, when you go to a university, yes, it's a lot of work to study, but you also have a lot of free time. You have a lot of, holidays, non-term time, a lot of time after lectures, weekends, and that gives you time to explore, but also it's a great space to meet other young people, other people who want to innovate, potential co-founders. I would say one of the best, pools and sources of co-founders is when you're at university. So it's almost like the benefits of studying is not the degree, but it's the stuff around it. So the fact that you have a lot of time, you have a lot of potential co-founders, and you also have the opportunity to move somewhere new. So some people might go, oh, how do you move to a new country? I need a visa, or, immigration's tough, studying's an entry to do that, or at least spend a few years in a country, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, I want to go to the US and experience the US, but it's very hard to go there. Yes, but you could study there, and yes, it might only be for a couple of years, but it gives you that opportunity to go there, build a network, experience it, find an idea, find a co-founder, and then see where it takes you. So you don't have to think too far beyond that as well. Like people want to plan out the next 10 years. They were like, okay, if I go to the US and study, then how do I stay there? How do I set up a business? Because immigration is really tough. But we can't plan the next 10 years. Just plan the next 12 months.
And yeah, I love that point about networking, but your like degree is like more like engineers and stuff like that, so people who want to build things. But I imagine like you met obviously your course mates, like people you went to lectures with. But did you go to any like events? Did you go to all events? Like what was your approach to that?
I would say two things. One is, yes, within the university, it's very easy to network because you have clubs and societies, you have a lot of events, you have obviously your lectures and people in class, you're working on projects together. So obviously, use the university structures and network to the max, but then don't live in the university bubble as well. So while I was in London, I really tried to get into the London tech community and meet other founders, meet other engineers by going to, for example, there's a Node.js meetup in London once a month. I remember at the time because Node.js was really big, JavaScript was really big. And once a month, they would have a meetup where someone would present some topics on Node, and you met other developers, you met builders, you met founders. And there's so many of these events, right? You can use meetup.com, you can use whatever. But while you are studying, it's important not to be caught up in that university bubble, but also go outside and integrate into the product community, the tech community, the entrepreneurship community as well.
That's a good advice. Like that's personally what I try to do right now. That's crazy. Like I thought you would say something like go to university events, like I don't know, like parties or whatever. But that's actually quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Because I find the problem is universities are very good at creating a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is it doesn't expose you to stuff that's happening in the industry and, in the real world in a way, to kind of sound cliche. And a lot of the time you go and speak to people who are actually trying to build stuff and build a startup, and you realize you might need slightly different skills than you're developing in university. And if you can start working part-time for a startup while in university, you'll also develop those skills and you'll realize what it's actually like to build a startup and what skills are needed. And that's something that I did. So I met a couple of founders in London, and they were trying to start this kind of food dining app called Gleet. And I worked with them for a couple of months, built them a product. It didn't do very well because the idea it wasn't ready for the time, or we just didn't know how to find the customers. But it really exposed me to, how do you build a product from start of the idea to finish, and how do you validate it? How do you start testing it out with users? And it was my first exposure to kind of a startup and working in a team and everything that comes with that.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So, as I understand, after this project, which didn't work out quite well, or at least it worked in terms of learning, but not in terms of maybe success as a startup. So you
Yeah.
then transitioned to Unibuddy, or was something else before that? Like, how many attempts did you fail before Unibuddy?
I'd say a few, probably, at least two or three. So Gleet was one of them, the kind of food-based app. I also tried building my own kind of student website in South Africa called Student View, where it will allow students to review their university and their professors. And I built that, started sharing it, and it started to get some traction and some reviews. But there was a lot of problems with it. in terms of how do you actually monetize it? How do you keep people coming and writing reviews? What's the incentive? And I didn't really push that any further. And again, I built it in the wrong way because I ended up using like a WordPress backend because I didn't really know how to build things properly at the time. So I really learned about like what not to do in terms of building a scalable platform as well. And it was an interesting experience. So yeah, definitely 2 or 3, app that I built. And you'll see a common thread if you look at a lot of indie hackers, the famous ones like Levels, you will see they show you their list of projects. They've built like often 100 different apps and projects, and it's really 4 or 5 of them that have brought all their income and success. So I think that's an extreme case. If you're an indie hacker, it's a much lower chance of success. So you got to build lots of things because only 4 or 5% of things will succeed. But if you're building like a full-on startup with a team, I think your startup success, your chance of success is a lot higher because obviously you have a team behind you, you have more validation because you're probably getting some investment versus as an indie hacker where you're just sitting in your room building things very quickly and it's just you and it's very easy to kind of like convince yourself that something's a good idea on your own. So I think that's kind of a problem with indie hackers. I find they kind of sit there, convince themselves something is really good and they build a lot of things and it fails, but they become exceptionally good at building things. And I think that's a good skill to have. So I don't think it's a bad idea. If you've never built something before and you want to get good at building, go do the whole build 12 products in 12 months thing. That's like if you look that up now, that's like kind of a thing that's been made popular. Build 12 startups in 12 months, 12 products in 12 months. And the goal is not to have 12 successful startups in 12 months. That's not going to happen. But it's to just put in those reps, right? Put in the reps like you do at the gym to build that muscle where after your 12 startup in 12 months, you're going to be so good at speaking to customers, at building products, at iterating, at knowing what's working, at building products, at coding, at QA, at testing, at hiring people. It's just in the early stages, it's all about putting in the reps to get good at those skills. And ultimately, creating a startup is a skill-based thing. Like it's about 2 things. How good are you at building a product and how good are you at selling? And if you're good at those 2 things and you put them together, you will create a successful business at some point. Yes, there's timing and luck because is the market ready? Is the customer ready? What's the competition like? There's always a little bit of timing and luck, but you can't control those things. So focus on the things you can control, which is building an exceptional product and being able to sell and understand what your customers want.
Some people come from more privileged backgrounds, some come from less privileged backgrounds, and as you mentioned, like for example, build 12 products in 12 months is a year without income in some cases, or maybe some extended period of time. Like obviously there is a lot of people with rich parents who can just support them if something goes bad and they will not be homeless or something like that. But you personally coming from a bit like a less financially wealthy background, what is your take? What are your techniques for listeners who are actually trying to make this leap of faith but don't have that safety net from your parents?
Yeah, it's a great question. And naturally, it will depend on what stage of life you're in and what your responsibilities are. The first thing to do is focus on reducing your monthly expenses and how much you need every month to live, right? Because that's really the biggest blocker. The more money you need every month to live, the more savings you need, and the less your runway is going to be. So, for example, if you're living in London and you're spending $5,000 a month, $20,000 is not going to give you a lot of time, right? That gives you 4 months. However, I know a lot of entrepreneurs and people who are living in Bali or Thailand, and they're doing it for, $1,000 a month, even $1,500 a month. So with 20,000, they've got a lot of time, right? In some cases, they have a year and a half. So it's a big difference. $20,000 in Thailand can get you a year and a half. And in London, it's getting you 4 months.
Come to Lithuania. You will have same experience finance-wise.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, obviously the place you're in makes a big difference. And that's also something you should be willing to get out of your comfort zone, get on a plane and live somewhere else for 12 months if that means you have a much longer runway. Because if you're from an expensive country, you need a lot more savings and a lot more runway to then buy yourself that time to create something. So that's why it's so popular, right? Like Thailand's like probably the most popular place for nomads, for indie hackers, for entrepreneurs who are bootstrapping, because you could have like a, a local meal for $1. You can't get that in most Western countries.
Okay, not that cheap. Lithuania, not that cheap.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of countries in Europe that are more affordable, but probably Southeast Asia is like the cheapest you're going to
Yeah.
get. From what I've heard, I've not done the bootstrapping in Thailand, but a lot of people I know like show me their budget and they're living really comfortably, for $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month.
Okay, so besides cutting down the costs, what are other things we need to do in parallel?
I'd say there's two things, right? So cutting down the cost is one thing, and the second thing is, can you get some kind of income stream? And you can, in a way, there's the strategy of creating a muse. And the famous example of this is the Airbnb founders. I don't know if you heard about the story.
Please tell me.
So the Airbnb founders, when they were starting off, same problem. They needed to obviously pay their rent. They're in San Francisco. It's very expensive. So it's kind of like, it's difficult because you're taking your attention away from your main business. But the idea is you create a little business that's not for the long term, but it's just to make some quick money. So what they did was, it was election time, and I think it was Barack Obama and John McCain that were the two election candidates in that year. So they came up with these two new cereals, and they called it Obama O's and Captain M's or Captain McCain's or something like that, right? So it was like two different cereals for the two candidates, and they started marketing that, and that kind of went viral, and they sold a lot of it because obviously it's election time and people were like, oh, cool, I want to support the candidate and I'll buy this one for supporting. And they made like maybe a quick, I don't know, like 40 or 50 grand, right? $40,000, $50,000. But that's not a sustainable business, right? You literally like, that's going to sell for the election year, and then it's not going to sell anymore because nobody cares about Obama and McCain after the election's over. But it was like, yeah, it's kind of what Tim Ferriss and that community calls a muse. It's a business that's kind of low maintenance. You come up with it quickly, and you sell quickly, and you make money quickly, and that can fund your runway. So that's an interesting idea. To be honest, I haven't done it myself because, as I said, it takes away time and focus from your actual business, which I don't like, because I'm a strong believer in focus, and that the best way to do it would be either save up or do this muse first and get the money, and then focus 100% on the business you're trying to build. But it doesn't always work out perfectly, because you might start your business, then you realize, oops, I'm running out of money, I need more time. So you pause it, you create the muse, maybe you make like 10 or 20 grand quickly by doing some like crazy, I don't know, drop shipping, some like one of these like, quick businesses. I'm pretty sure drop shipping doesn't work anymore, but there's obviously like ways you can make like quick money that's not about a sustainable business, and then you go back to focusing on your business. More traditional ways is obviously just you still keep a part-time job, or you do some consulting, or you do something that just brings in some income, because it's really a simple equation. It's like reduce your expenses and find a way to get income so that it matches your expenses, or find a way to save a lump sum to have enough for your expenses for the next 12 months. I feel 12 months is a good number. 6 months is a bit stressful. If you only have 6 months when you're starting a new business.
That was a very interesting example. Like, wow.
Yeah.
And also regarding cash flow businesses, I think it doesn't need to be like something like drop shipping or like cereals, but maybe it could be like some, you know, softwares which are especially with explosion of AI, like maybe you have some, I don't know, not like ideas, maybe you have even ideas, but like niches to look into for these cash flow positive, but not long-term sustainable things.
Exactly. And I feel the key point here is that make sure you understand that this is a temporary business, that you're doing it as a muse, and you're going to make some money and then shut it down. Because I also see a lot of people, they keep creating these unsustainable businesses, and then they make maybe 10K here, 20K here, even 50K or 100K. But you then can do that for years, and you might like find 3, 4, 5 years pass, and you've done a lot of these like unsustainable small businesses. You've made a quick buck here or there, but you look back and you're like, you could have built a big tech company in 4 or 5 years that could be worth, 10 million, 20 million, 50 million. And you've made maybe 100, 200, 300,000 with your little businesses. So I think long-term thinking is very important, and you should always optimize for the long term. And don't fall into the trap of then just building these small businesses only because you can make a quick buck from things. And I have a lot of friends who I kind of like argue with them. I'm like, every month you're coming to me with a new idea. Like, yes, you might make a quick buck, but you can't come up with a new idea every month because you're not focusing, you're not spending enough time to actually solve a problem, and you're not going to create something really big. Yes, you might make a quick 10K, 20K, maybe even 100K. But I think in the long term, you want to build a big company where your equity and your stake is going to be worth millions. And that's a much better route to go.
And also regarding the ideas, so I personally consider myself an ideas person, not to the fact that I don't execute, but from that I get distracted all the time. Like I think like I have this idea, that idea, but you know, execution is the important part. So how do you deal with that woman in the red dress in the Matrix movie syndrome? Like to just, you know, not get distracted every something new comes out.
My gut feel is that the reason why you're distracted by new ideas is because you haven't found a problem you're really interested in. What I found is when I found a problem that one, I knew or I could see there was a big opportunity, and two, it was very interesting, the shiny new ideas stopped being interesting. And I would say there's two phases. There's the testing phase where, yeah, you'll have 100 ideas, and that's fine. And that's okay to then test and validate a new idea every week. That's very different, right? But when it comes to execution, once you've tested, once you've validated, once you feel you have enough information to go, there's something here. There's an opportunity. There's a market. I'm interested in this problem. I think I'm the right person to solve this problem. Once you have all this information, you need to go full focus on that and then stop getting distracted. So I think that's what people get wrong. They get wrong splitting their attention with execution versus splitting your attention with validation when you're trying to find an idea that is sticking. So yes, the strategy that's kind of analogous to this is a poker strategy, right? And I've mentioned this in some of my videos, which is, I can't remember the name, but it's called, or it's rather the way it works is, so the really good poker players, what they do is they won't bet on every hand. They will wait when they have the right cards. And when they have the right cards, they go big, right? So they're not betting, say, an equal amount on 10 different hands, because that's not a good strategy, because that means you're betting the same amount when you have weak cards and when you have good cards. But they will wait and wait and wait. They won't bet anything on like the bad cards or the smaller hands. But when they have a good hand, they go really, really aggressive. And you should do the same thing as an entrepreneur. Like, once you find that idea that you validate and you think it's a good hand, go super aggressive on execution and be very, very, very focused on it.
And
It's
also, yeah,
in a
sorry.
way, you kind of, yeah, in a way, you kind of bet everything on that, right? But if you like bet a little bit on every idea, one, you don't win a lot, and two, you're splitting your focus.
And also regarding the speed of execution. So you mentioned 12 products in 12 months, or this concept of just finding really something that sticks with you. So I imagine that you said you need to go right ahead, but how to pick up the pace, or not even pick up the pace, how to understand the pace? Like, what is fast, what is slow?
For me, it's very simple. The speed depends on your feedback loop, your customer feedback loop. Slow is if you take months to build a product, you then take months to sell it to customers, and then it takes months to get feedback from the customers, and then you implement the feedback on the product, and you've only done one loop and one iteration after maybe a year, right? That is a slow build, slow sales cycle, slow feedback loop. There are some industries where you might have to do this, like if you're trying to sell a massive banking product, cybersecurity product to a big bank, right? Maybe they're going to have slow sales cycles, which is why, to be honest, I don't like those kind of businesses and I try to avoid it. There's the other end of the spectrum where if you build a B2C product, you could put out the product, you could build it in a couple of weeks, launch it, put out some Google ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, get people to use it, get feedback after a couple of weeks, improve the product, change it, or decide that, hey, I'm shutting this down because the feedback's bad. Nobody wants this. That's perfect, right? Because remember, we want to fail fast as well. And that's why 12 startups in 12 months, it's cool because if you're moving on to the next one, it means that you've launched it, gotten feedback, and you think that, okay, let's move on to the next one. But maybe you won't do 12 because maybe after the fifth one, this one starts getting traction. It starts moving, you get really good feedback, and you're like, actually, this is the one I want to focus on for the next few years. And you don't create the sixth one. So I think if you do 12 startups in 12 months, hopefully you don't do 12, right? Because the point is you're trying to fail fast, and 11 of those ideas, might fail, and that's okay. But the 12th one, you should ideally validate and get traction. Worst case is all 12 fail and you just have a ton of experience and you're really, really good at building and executing, getting feedback and understanding whether you should iterate or shut down the product. But I would say, usually after 4 or 5, you're going to find something that works.
So maximizing that probability from what you're saying.
Yeah, it is. It is a numbers game to an extent, but it's important to have a fast feedback loop, because if you don't have a feedback loop, you can just keep building things and you don't even know why you're failing. And you can spend I've seen a lot of people just keep investing time building because they think, I know what feature it has, I need to add this, it's going to work. And then they put it out, it doesn't work. Oh, I'm going to add this, it'll work. And they put it out, it doesn't work, right? So again, fast feedback loop is speed, slow feedback loop is not speed. And the slower the feedback loop, the higher your chance of failure. Because the higher the chance you're building something nobody wants and that nobody asked for.
That's fascinating. I personally spent months sitting alone and building software, which in the end nobody used. And I found it rewarding from what you said because I learned how to build stuff. But regarding product market fit, I tried to get as many interactions, conversations like as possible, like as you said. Because, yeah.
And that's the skill. If I had to pick one skill to focus on, I'd say it's that customer feedback loop. Because to be honest, building, you can get good at that on your own. Even selling, you could do courses, you can learn how to sell. The thing that most entrepreneurs are not good at, and maybe even a bit uncomfortable, or they try to avoid it, is the customer feedback loop. Because it involves dealing with rejection. A lot of the time, you're going to deal with rejection. It's hard to find people to give you feedback. They might not have time. you might have to approach 100 people and 10 of them will agree to use the product and give you feedback, right? Or even worse, you might have to cold email 1,000 people on LinkedIn and 1% of them will click your product and use it. So it's tough, but that's what separates the great from the good, right? Or the good from the bad. If you can master the skill of having a fast customer feedback loop and finding a way to get people to use your product and give you feedback, you will 100% succeed. I have no doubt about that. That is the number one golden skill that will lead to success.
And also what I found from my personal experience, it's interesting, like, will you agree or disagree? But there's a lot of like people great at something, like not small, but like niche down. So for example, I speak to guys who are very good at, in my opinion, at like programming, like or something, but they are scared to approach people. Or some other people like want to have are good at communicating, but they don't want to be unstable or something like that. And you as entrepreneur, like as you say, it's a variety of different skills, and you are just combining all of this and getting new customer feedback loops. And it's interesting that you outlined this specific skill as number one. So basically, you are just doing what everybody from like psychological perspective is scared to do, to just get rejected, like because in the past times it meant survival or flourishing. So yeah.
Yep. And you can be creative, right? Like everyone focuses on online, but why don't you go with a tablet with your app or your website on it, go to a shopping mall, walk around, and just go up to people and be like, hey, will you try out my product, right? And that's tough because you're going to get rejected. People are going to look at you like you're weird.
Most because you are.
Yeah. And you're weird. And most people are going to say no. But guarantee you by the end of the day, you'll get at least 10 people that will use it as well. And then you can also offer incentives, right? So a lot of companies, they might give you a voucher, or they might give you a little like token to give, like big companies, they pay people to give feedback, but it's so hard to get it right. Like I've done a lot of calls where I've used a product, I've given feedback, and then they gave me whatever, like a $50, $25 Amazon voucher, because that's how valuable that feedback is. And they want feedback because especially these products were built for CTOs or engineers. They want CTOs and engineers to give them feedback, and they were willing to pay me for like 20 minutes of my time, like a $50 Amazon voucher, sometimes even more. Like I think I've gotten like even $200 Amazon vouchers for doing like 30 minutes call to try out the product and give them feedback, right? And if big companies are spending that much money on it, then you should realize why it's so valuable and why you got to hustle, because you're probably not going to afford to give people like even $50 Amazon vouchers to give you feedback. But you got to hustle and find a way to get that feedback, and maybe give them something. Maybe take someone out for a coffee, right? Be like, hey, I'll buy a coffee, chat for 20 minutes. I want you to give me some feedback on the product. You know, a lot of people will not say no to a free coffee if they have the time. Right? It's a small thing, but everyone likes a free lunch. Everyone likes a free coffee as well.
Yeah. Okay. So we've diverted quite a bit. It was very interesting, but right now I want to come back a bit to your story. So your student view startup, it's very similar. I mean, don't get me wrong, but like it's similar niche to Unibuddy. Not like the same thing, but like similar stuff. So in your videos, you talked about what it took you to find a product market fit. So if you could elaborate on that. Also, as I've said before, like, you are very good at like finding right people, like building systems, like gluing everything together, at least in my opinion. And how did you approach your first Unibuddy business? Because if I remember correctly, you told me that you had somebody with domain expertise on the team, someone else. So what was the first successful like startup like in the beginning?
So I would say in terms of product market fit with Unibuddy, it was quite a journey. And this is where that budgeting and that personal runway for 12 months, 18 months can be really critical, because to be honest, we needed it. Otherwise, we would have been dead. Initially, my co-founder and we thought that we were creating a product for students, right? Because we were students, we thought we understood it, and we built an app for students who were in high school and they wanted to chat to university students in university. So we launched it to students, And it was amazing. A lot of them used it. Feedback was great. And that's another tricky part, right? Sometimes you can have a great product, great feedback, but the question is, how do you capture the value and who's going to pay for it? It's not always the person that gets value from your product that is going to pay for it. And that's kind of counterintuitive. But yeah, obviously students didn't really have money, so they didn't want to pay for the app. Maybe their parents had money, maybe the universities would have money, but we realized that we had completely targeted the wrong customer in terms of who pays for it. Because we tried it out, we had packages where they could use the app for free for some time and then they had to pay to use it further. Everyone used the app for free, and then 1% or less
Wow.
actually paid and moved on. And that's never going to work, right? If you have a 1% conversion rate from free trial or freemium, in the freemium model, you don't have a sustainable business. You got to have a higher conversion. So we were like, okay, students have no money, kind of obvious. We should have known this, but we need to go somewhere else. The next place we went was to high schools, because we said, okay, these kids are in high schools. High schools need to help their students to get into university. They have counselors. They probably have a budget. Let's try to sell it to high schools. A bit of a better hypothesis, but ultimately we were wrong again, because high schools do not really have big budgets for this part of the system. They're focused on, to be honest, teaching kids and getting them out of high school. They're not focused on helping them choose a university. Yes, they often have a counselor, but it's often a small resource. They're not spending huge amounts of money on this. So we would not be able to charge high schools a lot of money for the product. And it's very difficult selling to high schools because they're very fragmented and there's so many of them across different countries, right? And this is all, it's costing money, it's costing time. This is really 12 months later. We built a product, we tried to sell it to students. We then went to high schools, tried to sell it to them. And this is again why I go back to, you need to give yourself some time to find product to market fit. If you're lucky, you might find it in 6 months, but it's probably going to take 12 months or 18 months. Then about a year later, we go, okay, let's go to the last option, which is universities. And that's where we started to have some calls and meetings with universities, and they saw the products and they're like, oh, this is really interesting for us because we're trying to engage our students and we have a big marketing department and we've got a big marketing budget for this. So that's when we knew we were onto something. And we had to figure out the right format and the right product because they didn't want to send all their students to a separate app. So that's where the idea came. And I had this idea of, can't we embed the product in the university's website as an iframe? So I started to play around with this, and then I managed to find a way to embed the code and even customize the color and things to their website. So if your university had a website with like a blue color scheme, you could then add Unibuddy to it with that same blue color code. So it would match and essentially white label it, right? And that's where it hit. When we pitched that to universities, the question was, okay, how much is this? And I always say that's when you know you have product market fit. When you stop getting questions about, can't I have this feature, or why doesn't it do this, but how much is this? Kind of take my money. We want people to be saying, okay, I'm ready to pay you. I'm taking out my wallet. That's how you know you truly have product market fit. If they're asking you lots of questions or they're like, no, we need this feature, we need this, you probably don't have product market fit for that customer and you need to go back and work on the product. And that's when we truly had a business. We had product market fit. We started piloting with the first 5 universities. And to go on from there, it was about bringing in someone who knew the university industry. That's when we brought in our CCO, who had 20 years of experience working in universities in the UK. And he then started to introduce us and set up meetings with dozens of universities after that, because we went from that initial 5 to really capturing the whole UK market, which is 150 plus universities. And
Wow.
we could do that.
Wow.
We could do that fast because we had a domain expert that basically knew all 150 universities and could call them up and be like, hey, I've got this cool product. Let's have a copy and I'll show it to you. And people would meet with him because he was known in the space, right? Whereas if you're just a student and you call a university, hey, I've got this new product, they're going to probably slam the phone down on you.
So you partnered up with industry influencer in a way.
Yeah, it's the old school way of doing it, right? Like not an Instagram influencer, but like an influencer that just has a good reputation and someone that everyone in the industry knows or is familiar with or is friends with. Those people are worth their weight in gold, right? If you can find that. So we were, yeah. I mean, I would say we obviously it comes down to hard work, going out, networking, again, LinkedIn, connecting with people, and you'll find that person. So you just got to put in the work and a bit of luck, of course. But if you put in the work, I believe that you will find those kind of people.
And was there a moment when you thought of giving up before that successful sequence? You told me like it took over a year to develop, come to that point. Like, what was it like in day to day in the trenches?
Yeah, I would say the moment was tough when we realized we couldn't find product market fit or paying customers from both students and high schools. And to be honest, it was a kind of like the last throw of the dice to go to universities. If that didn't work, we would have shut it down. I think it's just it was a lot of time. We would have felt like we tried everything. We tried students, we tried high school, there was like nothing else to try. Um, and we would have given up. So I'm glad we didn't give up before that because the last throw of the dice was the one that worked. And sometimes that's how it is, right? And you know, there's this meme where I don't know if you've seen it, where there's someone like digging for gold
Yeah.
and they dig and dig, right? And then they stop just before they've hit the gold. And I think that's the most difficult part about product market fit. It's how long do you keep digging before you give up, right? Because there might be gold just around the corner, but they also might not be, right? And you might be going down a dead end, in which case you should move on to the next thing. And that is, to be honest, I don't have a right answer to that. I cannot tell you for sure that you will find gold or you will not, and you need to use your own judgment. But for us, I would say it was one last throw of the dice. If we didn't hit product market fit there, we would have given up, shut down the business.
And what were your biggest lessons or maybe even failures from this successful business? So, what did you learn the most?
In a way, I feel like you can become a victim of success because I would say myself and my co-founder, we made a lot of mistakes once we were growing fast. So two big ones that we made was when you're growing fast, you raise a lot of money. And then for some reason, there's this pressure to spend that money really quickly, right? So instead of looking at what you need to grow, you start to look at how can I spend this money that I have? And those are very different things, right? Because if you raised 5 million, you will find a way to spend 5 million very easily. But you could spend maybe 1 million effectively and 4 million you're going to be spending on stupid things that don't actually move the needle and don't actually grow your business. And a lot of companies do this who raise VC money, especially because there's this unwritten rule of pressure that when you raise money, you need to spend it. If you raise 20 million and you told your VC, we're going to spend this over the next 10 years, they will look at you like you're crazy. Right? Maybe this sounds surprising, but you cannot go to your VC and say, we're going to spend this 20 million over the next 10 years. To be like, no, crazy. We're like, you got to grow fast. You got to spend this over the next 2 years. Right? And that's kind of, I think, something that a lot of people don't know. So there's a lot of pressure when you raise VC money to grow quickly because they want you to grow quickly or fail. Because
Oh,
for them, it's about, I want a unicorn that's going to give me back 100 times my investment. I don't want a business that just doubles in 5 years. I don't want a business that 10x's in 10 years. I want 10x in 2 years, or I want 100x in 2 years. So I want you to spend everything and get really, really big, or spend everything and fail. And that goes back to my initial kind of preference now for bootstrapping and avoiding VC money because of that pressure that comes with it, which might not be healthy or good for your business. But I would say, yeah, two things to be careful of scaling is you become very wasteful. You can become very wasteful and you lose your efficiency. And you can hire too quickly. That's the other mistake I would say I made. Hired too many people too quickly because we thought we had to spend money and grow. And when you hire too quickly, two things, you'll usually drop the bar and you will hire people that are not as good as they should be. And second, you will grow headcount really fast, but you are spending really inefficiency, so you're not growing revenue fast enough. And that's a big, big red flag. I think the biggest metric to look out for when you're scaling is revenue per head, right? So if you're a 1 million a year business and you have 10 people, 10 team members, you're making 100,000 per person, right? If you're a 2 million a year business, but you have 50 people, that's really bad, right? You double revenue, but you 5 times your expenses, right? And your revenue per head is like terrible in comparison. So for me, if you've got 100,000 revenue per head, how do you keep that or make that even better? Can you actually go from 1 million to 2 people to 1 million to 2 million by only going from 10 to 15 employees? Because that's amazing. You're actually increasing revenue per head if you can do that. You're doubling revenue, but only growing headcount by 50%. You're not even doubling headcount. But what often happens, startup will increase revenue and will increase the headcount and the revenue won't grow as fast. And that means you're spending money on the wrong things and you haven't found the engine of growth. And you haven't figured out how to double your revenue, grow really, really quickly for you to be spending that much money on it.
And how to not drop the bar when, I mean, yes, it's a good metric, like what you told about revenue per head, but how not to drop a bar, especially it's a skill, like you said, like there wasn't many iterations, like you haven't done hiring before. Like if a person who doesn't know anything about hiring would end up in this position of needing to hire, maybe not as much as you, but some people, how to approach this problem from your current experience?
So I have 2 rules. The first one is if you don't want to drop the bar, you have to think in terms of if this person is not a hell yes. So if it's not a strong yes, then it's a no. And that's the saying I use, and that's the saying my team uses. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And that's a mistake I see a lot of people make because they will interview someone and then people will go, oh yeah, they're kind of nice. You know, they're kind of good. So let's hire them. But kind of good or a maybe or a soft yes is not the same as you going, hey, this person's amazing. We should hire them right now. They're going to change the company. You know, I'm super excited to work with them. You want to hear those things. When you interview someone, when your team is interviewing someone, you want people to come to you. They should be really excited. Hey, let's hire this person. They're a hell yes. They're going to be game changing for us. And that's, I think, it's a very high bar, but that's truly, if you want to keep a bar, you've got to have this rule. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. The second rule is that you cannot put deadlines to hiring because then you will drop the bar. So if you say, I have to hire someone by this time, you will drop the bar. And this is very difficult to do because sometimes you just need someone in or the business is going to struggle, right? But to be honest, I'm at the stage now where I've had enough experience where I'd rather struggle without a person than hire the wrong person. And I'd rather wait and maybe someone in your team or maybe even I, as a founder, I'm working extra hours or doing another role because I'm refusing to hire someone that's dropping the bar. And I'd rather do that for a few more months and wait for the right person than hire someone that's a soft yes or is not really that good so that I can give this role away and kind of, you know, it's easy on everyone else. And that's a very, very hard thing, right? Because you're putting pressure on people. You're basically having someone do 2 people's jobs because you're waiting to find the right person. But again, if you are truly, truly disciplined and you really want to keep the bar high, you've just got to be patient and you've got to refuse to hire until you find that hell yes. And that might mean struggling for a few months with less resources and a lot more pressure on your team. But I truly believe this pays off in the long run.
And how do you find talent? Because from other companies I spoke to, like they try to do like hackathons or something like that to, test the person or find the top performing people and then offer jobs or whatever. How do you approach it? Like, do you do just job postings? Do you ask for your network? Do you do like sort of hackathons? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, so I would say this leads on really nicely from keeping the bar high, because what I will find is if your core team is at a really high level and they're all A players and you are only hiring A players, your internal network and your referrals will be really, really good, because A players will refer you to A players, and A players often will have A players in their network, right? And that's why if you hire B players or someone slightly lower, it's very dangerous because it becomes a slippery slope where B players will then start hiring B players or start referring you to B players, because for them, that's the standard, right? And what you want is keep a team of A players and then leverage that network, right? So first port of call, always start with your network, get your own team who, if they're amazing, if they're rock stars, if they're A players, they will put out a LinkedIn post, they will contact the people that they know and can trust are really, really good. And you should hire from that internal network. Only if you cannot find someone from that internal network, then you start going to more traditional mediums, you start using recruiters, you start putting job ads out. But I found from my experience, especially hiring internally, for example, I tested out LinkedIn ads. It costs a lot of money, by the way. And you pay a daily rate, right, to have your job up on LinkedIn. The quality of applicants you receive is not very great. Like for every 1,000 you get on LinkedIn, you might get one or two good ones. So you're filtering a lot.
Wow.
You're filtering a lot, right? At least I'd say for every 100 there's one. So it's like 1 to 100 at least, but sometimes even 1 to 1,000. So I stopped using LinkedIn ads. I didn't experiment. I maybe spent about $200 and I realized it was not very good. And I found much better quality of people by one, using my own network and my team's network, and by two, using really good recruiters that could go and headhunt, or they have very good networks. So it ends up being a quality game, not a quantity game. That's what you realize.
Wow. Okay. I will also want you to elaborate a bit more about technical interviews and stuff like that. But right now I want to come back to your story. So what was the point when you decided that Unibuddy is enough for you at what you want to go to the next thing?
I would say the main reason is very personal. I don't think there's an answer for everyone, but you as a founder, there will be at a point where you start to get an itch for something new or to solve a new problem. And that could be driven by multiple things. Maybe you feel you've created what you wanted to create. Maybe you feel like your current company, it's growing on its own. You have a good team in place and you feel comfortable stepping away. Maybe you feel like you're more in scale mode and you're scaling what works and you're not trying to develop new products. You're not trying to come up with new systems, and that doesn't excite you anymore. So there's different types of founders, right? I know founders who they love the early stages. They love building new things. But once it becomes more about like, sales and maintenance and just scaling what works, they lose interest. And then maybe you want to hire some MBAs to then manage the company and you move on to the next thing. And I think I'm a little bit like that. I realize I like the early stages of pre-product market fit, of finding product market fit, of creating a new product, of finding a new customer, of hiring the initial team, of being in a small team of 10, 20 people. I find that once you get past 50 people, 100 people, you spend more time managing, you spend more time in meetings, you spend more time hiring, you spend more time dealing with politics. and I enjoy that less, just personally, right? And I also felt we weren't building new products, but we were selling the same products because it was working well. We kind of had the formula. It's like Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola doesn't need to change their product. They just need to sell more. They focus on marketing and sales. So it's kind of a smaller version of that. Every startup kind of becomes Coca-Cola at some point. And I would say a lot of founders, because if you're a founder, you probably love the thrill and the danger and the adventure, building something new, of taking some risk of, you know, you lose that thrill when you're selling Coca-Cola, right? Like it's kind of like it's working. It can work without you as well most of the time. So I just felt like I was ready to solve a new problem that the current company is working. You know, I'm still on the board of Unibuddy, so I still obviously spend a few hours a month or in a board meeting every 3 months, making sure everything's running properly, agreeing strategy with the leadership team, working with the board, helping where I can. But I don't want to be operational. I don't want to be working on it 10, 12 hours a day because, you know, a startup is a full-time obsessive thing. So you got to find joy in being obsessed about it for 10, 12 hours a day, weekends, nights. You're always thinking about it. And I wanted to sink my teeth into a new problem and get obsessed again about something else.
So transition from educational technology to farming technology. That's a quite interesting choice in my opinion. So how did that happen?
After Unibuddy, to be honest, I went on a search because one of the things is when you build your own company and you do it for a number of years, especially 5, 6, 7 years or more, it becomes like your identity, right? It becomes a part of your life. You think, I'm an EdTech founder, I'm a founder of this company, this is what I do. And when you leave it, you become lost. You're like, okay, who am I? What do I do? What am I interested in? What problem do I want to solve? So I kind of went on a search. I had coffees with a lot of founders, with accelerators, with startups, with CEOs, different industries, EdTech, climate tech, fintech, health tech, pretty much everything. I was trying to see what's out there, what's interesting. And it was a combination of things, but I wanted to be in an industry that's growing a lot and there's a lot of investment going on and there's a lot of change. So to me, when I was looking, this was, 2023, when I decided to leave Unibuddy and go into the next thing. Fintech, climate tech, AI, and health tech for me stood out as one, these very, very big problems that affect over 1 billion people. So something I've spoken about a lot, but these 1 billion people problems. And two, there's a lot of investment and opportunities in the space. The reason why I got into climate tech, because I would say at the time, it was probably the most trendy and there was so much going on and it was completely different from EdTech. So I also wanted to change because I'd been EdTech for 7 years of my life, working with universities and higher education. I just wanted to change. So climate tech, agriculture, farming, completely different thing. And I wanted to see what was the fuss in the climate industry and what was going on there and to kind of get an inside view about that and to learn more about it as well. So to be honest, it was just searching around, finding something interesting, sinking my teeth into a new industry that was growing, that was changing a lot, and seeing where it goes from there. Again, I go back to the point, don't try to plan for 5 years or 10 years, set yourself up for 12 months and then see where it takes you.
And the interesting part, for me at least, is that in Unibuddy you spend a very extensive amount of time, 7 years up to that point. I mean, now it's more, but in that BX startup, you spent a lot less time, 2 years or something like that, or maybe even less. So speed accelerated. You didn't find what you were searching for. You achieved results faster. What was the key moment of this acceleration?
Multiple reasons. I would say the first one is, again, I really like the early stage of building a product, getting it off the ground and getting the early customers. With BX, when I started there, they had no product, no revenue, no customers. So it was pretty much starting with a clean slate. I architected, built the product, hired the team, And we started to get our first customers, iterating with those customers. A little bit frustrating because in agriculture and big agriculture, it's a slow feedback loop. So what I mentioned is about you want a fast feedback loop. It's very difficult to get that when you're dealing with big farmers, right? It often ends up being weeks, sometimes months before you're getting feedback. So it starts being very slow. But it's a good experience because I learned how to work with that slower feedback loop and improve the product. So after around 2 years, we'd gotten to over 500,000 revenue. We were on track to 1 million revenue. And that's when I felt like, okay, I'd done that 0 to 1. I felt the sales cycle was a bit slow. So I knew it was going to be successful, and it's growing a lot now, and it's going to be more successful. But you've got to be willing to go through that long game and deal with the slow sales cycles. So I think it's a bit more of a slow burner. It takes more time. And I was seeing a lot of opportunity. AI was growing. I also wanted to start my own thing and co-found something because I was more like, I was a partner to the CEO and a very early employee, and I had good ownership in the company, but it wasn't my company. I wasn't a co-founder. I didn't have control, and I missed kind of that control and that jeopardy and being a co-founder and having full control. So I wanted to start my own thing and also take advantage of all of the AI opportunities that were going on. And that's why I would say there was an accelerated timeline. After 2 years, it's like, okay, cool. We're on track for $1 million revenue. They have a good product. I've now got it to a good place, and I'm ready to start something new, and ideally something in AI, because this is where I see the future.
And currently you're in hospitality technology, like familiar, you're current. So could you tell me more about that? Because you just told me something like you even are searching for even newer thing, or is this that newer thing?
Yeah, this is the newer thing. So after I left BX, I took a bit of a break. I needed to also leave London because at that point I'd been in London for 10 years. So earlier this year, actually March 2025, so about 9 months ago, I left London after I completed my last day at BX. And I went back home to South Africa, said, let me get some good weather, some time off, spend most of the time on the golf course and the beach, spend some time with my family. I think that's also important because when you're an entrepreneur, you tend to work in sprints. So you work very intense, you work these long weeks, you don't take much breaks, you're very, very obsessed. And then you kind of finish a sprint, and then it's important you take some space and refresh as well. So what I do is, for me, how that normally looks is, you spend often, in a way, a couple of years sprinting, and then you need to take a month or two off to refresh and decide, one, if you're going to continue, or two, what's the most sustainable way of working. Because the first 2 years of building a company is like the toughest, in my opinion. It's when you're finding product to market fit, you're sleeping really late trying to get the product done, you're dealing with angry customers, you're dealing with feedback, you're dealing with crisis after crisis, fire after fire on a weekend. You're stressed, you might run out of money in one day. The next day it looks like you're making a lot of money. So it's a roller coaster, right? It's emotionally draining. And it's important that you are able to take like those longer rests. And Naval talks about it a lot. Naval Ravikant, work like a lion, because you find lions, they will sprint when they're hunting, but then they rest for long periods of time to get ready for the next sprint or the next hunt. And I think in a way, startups are like that, right? You got to work in these sprints because you can't really work at a low intensity. Like working at a low intensity week after week, I've tried it. It just doesn't work with the game. It's just not part of the game. Like you've got to sprint, you've got to be obsessed because your competition will just like crush you otherwise. And then you got to find the time to rest because you need to be able to sprint again. So I'd actually argue startups are less of a marathon and it's more a sequence of sprints. And I think people sometimes get that wrong because they think it's a marathon. It's a 9 to 5. You work Monday to Friday. And yes, consistency matters. It compounds all of that. But working on something obsessively for the first few months, especially, is how you get it from 0 to 1 and off the ground.
To me, it sounds like you love the game. You love it, early stage sprinting.
Yeah, you love it and you hate it, right? You love it. It's extremely rewarding to create something out of nothing and to see, hey, we have a product that's working, we have customers, and we started with nothing, but you hate it because the pressure and the stress and the intensity that you have to be at for a prolonged period, it is painful. Like there's no two ways around it. You have to be willing to go through some pain and suffering to get something from 0 to 1.
To me, it sounds like you're like a serial entrepreneur where you don't value the corporate as much. And as you said, the slower pace, which is more consistent, but just maybe more even boring for you because of that. But also, like in the future, like how do you see yourself like building companies from 0 to 1, building systems, hiring people, giving some stocks and, letting it roll? Or what's the play there?
Yeah. So how old are you, by the way?
I'm 20.
20. So like I would say the way I look at it, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you're like a lifetime entrepreneur, you have a company in you every 5 to 10 years. So the way I look at it as a career, right? If you're 20 now, by the time you're 50, that's 30 years. So in 30 years, let's say on average every 5 years, right? You'll probably found a company, create it, sell it, or move on, stay on the board, whatever, right? So in 30 years, you would create 6 companies. So I would say that's a really good career. But these are 6 successful companies, right? Because obviously you're not going to spend 5 years of a company to realize that it's failing. You should fail much quicker than that, right?
Yeah.
So you might have failures along the way, but as I said, you want to fail quickly. So I'm sure I'm going to have some failures, but if I fail, I want it to fail in 6 months, in 12 months, in 18 months max, right? But if it's successful, I'm going to spend 5 years on it, maybe 10 years on it, to grow it to a big stage, sell it, IPO, or move on in some way. Hopefully you get some kind of exit. So for me, the way I look at it, Unibuddy was one company that's been a success. Familiar, it's on track, but it could fail. It's still early stages. We are just about product market fit, but we still need to prove a lot of things. But I would say, ideally I'm spending 4 or 5 years here and we have an exit. I'm almost 35 now. So I'd say I've got another 2 or 3 companies left until 50, right? I think I still want to be playing the game until 50. Post 50 and maybe before that in my 40s, I want to start thinking about investing, starting potentially a fund, angel investing, investing in entrepreneurs maybe like you, and then starting to play more of a mentor role, more of an investor role. But I don't see myself doing that full time right now because I like doing it. I like being in the game. I like, being in the trenches. But at some point, and maybe that depends on other things, right? Family, if you have kids, if you get married. So maybe in my 40s, I'll start to be like, okay, now I want to focus more as being a passive investor or an angel investor and mentoring other entrepreneurs, set up an accelerator or a fund. I don't want to start companies for myself. But right now, if you ask me, I still think I have another 3 companies in me before I'm going to be like, okay, I want to, mentor and invest.
That's a good answer. I mean, it's like a monopoly game from what you're saying.
And that's a way to look at it, right? Like you should think about your career, your next 30 years. You've got 6 successful companies in you, and you don't need all of them to be massive, but hopefully some of them are massive, maybe one of them becomes a unicorn, but most likely all of them will become a certain size and you'll get good reward from them.
Wow. Okay, then I need to ask you the questions which I was putting a bit off. So first one, how did Forbes 30 under 30 impact your network? Did it change anything or is this just a headline?
It's a good question. So it was Forbes 30 under 30. I was under 30 at the time
Yeah.
when I got into it. And yeah, I would say it's a mixed bag. So I've been on a lot of Forbes events. So when you do become part of their network, they invite you to, there's an under 30 or Forbes kind of community event every year. It's in a different location where all the listers are invited. And what's interesting is when I went to the event, so I went, for example, to the one that they had in Botswana, um, you met some great people, but on the other half, you also met a lot of kind of more influencer people that are very good at marketing. So I'd say it's a mixed bag. There's a lot of people that get into Forbes because they're more influencers or they're very good at marketing. And Forbes ultimately, they're a media company, right? So they're a bit more biased towards people who are very good at marketing themselves, who have a big following, who are maybe a bit more influencer type. And you do get a kind of a big percentage of people that are in that bucket. But on the other bucket, you do get just some very genuinely amazing entrepreneurs who have built amazing companies and they're still building amazing companies and they're doing incredible work. So I think the network is valuable, but it's you like any network, you've got to filter because it does come with these two kind of personalities as well.
Mm-hmm. And talking about network itself, so your social circle, your friends, as you might call them. So are those only the people you work with, or like I mean, I'm talking obviously about your latest YouTube posts regarding your old social circle dragging you down, like crabs in the bucket or something like that. So how did it evolve? How did it work? So did you find friends when you were like at lower levels of entrepreneurship, or is it like they say that it's all the high level people are on the mountain and you find them when you climb up, basically?
Yeah. The ideal case and what I've had in some situations is when you're starting off, you meet others that are starting off. And what you'll find is over time, some of them become very successful and some of them don't, right? So ideally, in those early days, you also meet some people who become very successful and you also become very successful. And then you have a very good network because of that. And you kind of knew each other from before you were successful and before they were successful. And that's kind of a special relationship because I think when you try to meet someone after they're successful, a lot of the time it's harder because they think, okay, this person just wants to meet me because, they're trying to sell me something or because, they know I'm successful so they can get something from me. So I think the advantage of meeting people before they're successful and in the early days is that you can grow together with them, but you don't know. Maybe they turn out not to be so successful, right? So I have a lot of friends who I met in the early days, like sitting in UCL's incubator in London. We are both starting companies, and now we both have pretty successful companies, and we still are good friends. And we talk about like 10 years ago, sitting in the incubator with no money and no experience, and what we're doing now. And that's quite a special relationship. On the other hand, the more successful you are, you do have access to high quality people. I have found that. So what you mentioned about, yeah, some people being on the mountain, that is kind of true, but you will find the more experienced you are, the older you are, the more successful you are, the better access you have to these people. Just because you will get invited to better events, you will have access to better locations, like whether it's communities, private member clubs, conferences, things like that, right? And it does matter, right? People are more likely to talk to you if you have a track record. That's just the truth. People look for social proof. People look for a track record. That is the truth in the world. So you will find people are more open to developing a relationship with you the more successful you are as well. But there's always this game where everyone tries to connect with people who are in a way more successful than them, and you want a mentor who is more successful than you, and that's where it becomes trickier. Because even for me, if I want to be mentored by an entrepreneur, like ideally they founded like companies that are very, very big, it's hard for me to get their time because they're probably working on companies right now that are also going to be very, very big, right? So I have to then show that I can bring something to them, and I need to work harder to get access. Maybe it's an introduction from someone I know or through my network. So it's easy to meet people that are the same level of success or less successful. It's much harder to find mentors and people that are more successful. And that kind of, it's a game you play through your life, because in a way, there's always someone more successful than you, and there's always someone less successful than you, right?
And as we touched mentorship, so what's your take on it? Also, as you know, as I know about you, you had somebody from Spotify, like high up, like mentor you at some point. So also, when you answer this, could you also elaborate on paid mentorship and in situations when you maybe cannot pay a person, but you provide some sort of value?
Yes. So when I was scaling Unibuddy, one of the most impactful things for me was having this mentor. Yeah, his name is Kevin. He was the VP of engineering at Spotify when Spotify was scaling rapidly and doing pretty cool things. Like, they came up with the squad model where you had independent squads that were deploying microservices, and this matrix structure, for example. So they were kind of leaders and innovators in scaling and growing technology teams and engineering teams. So it was just incredible having someone like that who, I could have a 1 hour call with every week and talk about the challenges. Hey, I need to hire 10 engineers at Unibuddy. How do I structure this? Or this team is not working. How do I change things? Or why are we going slow? What do we need to add? What do we need to unblock here? All these kind of things. There's always benefit in having someone that has solved similar problems before or the same problems before, right? In an ideal world, you never want to learn from your own mistakes. You want to learn from other people's mistakes, and you want people to be able to guide you, because it just like time is money in a startup. Like, you making the mistake, learning from it, then getting it right. Maybe it can cost you 3 to 6 months, which can be a big difference, and it can actually be the difference between failure and success as well. So 100% finding mentors who have done what you're doing or have seen a lot of the mistakes and problems that you are about to see is a cheat code. It's 100% a cheat code, and you should try to find that person.
And also, can you tell me a bit more, like how do you repay them? Because I understand in some situations you can pay in money, in others you can provide some sort of value. Because, or some, like, I mean, how it works from your experience, like finding those people and paying them back in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, the simple way is if you're at a stage where you've raised investment money, you can offer them incentive. There doesn't have to be cash. You could even give them some skin in the game, because that's a great way to have someone want your company to succeed, where if they own a little percentage of it, they will now want to mentor you to make the company succeed, because they benefit from that as well. So yes, there's a lot of things out there that, oh, you shouldn't give advisors equity. I don't fully agree with that, because I think a great mentor and a great advisor can really make a big difference. So I think the key is, don't give equity away to the wrong advisors or people that aren't really adding value. But someone who brings real value, it's actually a good, it's a great reason to give away some equity, a minority stake, because that gives them huge incentive to want you to succeed. And you want that. You want someone to have massive incentive to make you succeed, to mentor you, to help you solve your problems as well. So that's the ideal, because if you're paying cash, to be honest, they're not really incentivized to help you succeed. It's just a job. They're mentoring you because you're paying them for their time. And yes, sometimes you might have to do this, because a lot of the great mentors, they just want to, they don't have enough time. So if they're giving you their time, they want to be paid for it. And that's useful in some cases, but ideally you agree an equity deal or a combination. You say, okay, here's some shares, and we'll pay you less cash because we're giving you some shares. So you agree a much lower rate, because in startups, often cash is king. You're trying not to run out of money, but you have lots of shares to give as well.
That's interesting. That's pivotal. I haven't like wow. I mean, yeah, just make them incentivized. People are selfish. Like,
Yeah,
that's cool. Uh,
exactly right. Um, it's a thing that you have to look at every part of the business, not just your employees. You've got to incentivize your employees, but also your advisors, your board, your investors. Everyone needs incentive.
And also, coming back a bit to employees and hiring process itself. So right now you are sharing a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. You are currently searching for team members in your startup. You're trying to keep that bar high. So what would be your tips and tricks, if we can call them like that,
In terms of incentivizing,
in terms of hiring? So I'm talking right now like a bit finding your team members, especially when you're starting out or in general.
yeah.
You need to train your younger self on hiring. What do you do?
So a couple of things. A quote I really like. I can't remember where it's from, but when you meet someone, you should imagine they have a sign on their forehead that says, "Make me feel important." Right? So every single person, ultimately deep down, they want to feel like what they're doing is important, that it matters, that they are appreciated, and that they feel important, right? So the great thing about a startup is, especially if someone's in a corporate, like you have so many things that you could sell that's going to make someone feel way more important and valuable, right? One, when you're in a startup, you should have a strong mission and a sense of purpose. So you're selling them the mission. If you're joining us, you're becoming a part of this mission. But two, massive ownership, right? So I'll give you an example right now. So found my first engineer at Familiar. Her title is not senior software engineer or software engineer. It's founding engineer.
Oh,
But
okay.
because you're not going to get founding engineer title at a big corporate. And she knows that one, she has a massive responsibility now. She's a founding engineer. She's responsible for like the initial architecture. She's got to take massive ownership. I'm expecting her to actually act like a founder. And it's good for everyone because I want her to act like a founder. And it's important that she feels important because she is super important, right? And that's really important. When you're hiring people, you need to show them why they're going to have massive ownership. They're super important. They're going to make a big impact, and that you're doing something that has a strong mission and purpose. And if you do that, if you imagine everyone with that sign, make me feel important, and you do that for every single person in your company, you'll have an amazing team. They will come to work and they'll be willing to give everything for your company and for you. And of course, incentive matters. Everyone we have in the company has really good equity, right? Everyone has a good percentage in the company. So if we succeed, if we make money, they're making money as well. And again, equity makes you feel important. I'm not just an employee, I'm an owner too, right?
Wow, I did not expect that. That's but it's like it's almost like this Machiavellian world, you know, like
Yeah. It's something that maybe people won't admit, but it's deep down, it's just the truth. Like even me as a founder, I want to feel important. Maybe that's why I like founding things, you know?
yeah, yeah. And also, okay, coming back from another angle. So regarding investors. So now we talk about finding people. Now choosing investors. What did you learn about the right investors? As you said, some investors push you to just be like $1 billion company or fail. I imagine not all people are like that. Like there's different variety of this. So how do you approach this? Because you are not only having one investor, you have people to choose from.
Yes. A really good thought experiment to do before you take on an investor is you want to be comfortable with going into a partnership with this person when things start going wrong. So every investor and every board member is easy to work with when things are going right. And what I mean is when your revenue is growing, when you are making money, when the company is doing well. Where things start becoming can become very toxic is you have a bad quarter. You go to your board meeting, revenue's gone down maybe, or a competitor has put on a better product and you're behind. It's a very tough thing to then go to your board with, right? Because they're not going to be happy. And if you have horrible investors or horrible board members, they will react to that in a very bad way. You know, they might put more pressure on you. They might threaten to fire you. They might start shouting at you. They might threaten to pull their money or challenge why you did certain things in the wrong way. And that's not what you want, right? You want the investor who, when times get tough, where things go wrong, they're going to actually help you get out of it. They're going to be calm. They're going to be supportive. They're going to give you honest feedback, helpful feedback. And you're going to work as a team to get out of that. So that is the critical mental model. Simply ask yourself, will I want to work with this person when things get bad? And when the stress is on, when the pressure is on, how will they react? And that's a very hard thing, right? You can't really get that from an interview or speaking to someone. One of the only foolproof ways to do it is to speak to other founders who they invested in, right? Speak to other founders who have been on a board with them, because chances are that founder had some tough times and they will tell you how they reacted. So do your homework, do your due diligence, just like how VCs do their due diligence on you. You do your due diligence, you do your reference checks on them. That is the most important. If you don't do reference checks, it's a bit of a gamble. You are taking a big chance because they could turn out to be an absolute horrible person that's going to make your life a misery when things go wrong, right? And you don't want that where someone has a board seat, they own a piece of your company, they have a controlling stake, and they're going to make your life a misery. So reference checks, critical for me. Like, you should not bring an investor on unless you know a founder that can vouch for them and the founder that you can trust, ideally. So it's tough, but again, you got to use your network. If it means you contacting 100 people on LinkedIn, get that call to get that honest vouching and honest feedback, do it. Yeah.
Why do you choose traditional / boring business industries?
The big thing is that most people don't want to work on them. So it's just starting off from a very fundamental perspective. Boring businesses have massive markets and massive potential, but there's much less people that want to work on them or even aware that they exist, right? Everyone wants to work on the sexy business. Everyone wants to build the next app, the next social media, the next Instagram. So you're facing competition from just like, you know, a ridiculous amount of people. Boring businesses, you have an advantage straight away where very few people are working on it. Less people are even aware they exist. And what you'll find is the bar is much lower in terms of what customers expect, because they're so used to having poor products or mediocre products, you know, that if you can produce something cool and slick with a nice user experience, with a great user interface, with like fun features and a fresh feature set, a fresh outlook, they're going to be so impressed as well. So I think that's the other thing that people don't realize with boring businesses. You can often disrupt them a lot more easily, and you can impress your customers more easily compared to, you know, these kind of sexy businesses where everyone wants something like super nice and sexy that looks good, that functions well, because there's so much out there and there's so much competition. And I'll give you like a really simple example right now that I'm dealing with, right? So in my house in South Africa, we've got a pool and it obviously needs a pool cleaning. There's only 2 pool cleaning services that can enter the kind of resort and the estate and has like access and I'm able to use. The first one that I used to use, they were doing a terrible job and the communication was terrible and they didn't even like provide proper invoicing and things like this. So I stopped using them and I switched to the second one. And now the second one has become really bad. You know, they're not communicating well. They're doing a bad job. And I'm just like, if someone started a new pool cleaning business, got the basics right. Like you don't need a fancy app, but you just did like, you just had like a good ticketing system, like customer support ticketing. You communicated well. You sent photos after your job, before your job, simple things like that. I would pay you 50% more and I would switch to you instantly. But it's a boring business. No one wants to do it. Nobody wants to learn how to clean pools. The existing incumbents are doing pretty bad job, and they know they can be bad because people don't have another option. Right? That's the other thing. It's like people will sink to the level that they can get away with. And you can go in and disrupt that and create something really cool if you're willing to get into these businesses that no one else wants to get to. And AI is not going to replace pool cleaning. That's going to be there for a while. AI is not going to replace people who cut your hair. So there's a lot of these businesses that are boring that AI is not going to replace, that there's so much of opportunities and you can do a much better service as well.
That's an interesting thought experiment. Yeah. Okay, man. Now comes the toughest question. The question I was edging to ask, and for, I don't know, small percentage of viewers which are still with us. What advice would you give to 20-year-old self, or to me, like in my age bracket?
I'm trying to think of the most valuable thing that I would say. I would say if I look back to when I was 20, the one feeling I had was I have so much of time. And the advice I would say is you think you have time, but you should not think in this way. You need to value the time and the energy that you have right now and make the most of it. And you need to have a strong bias towards action, because it's important you spend the next 5 years, 10 years to really build up your skills as an entrepreneur and really execute and take action. It's very easy to get caught up in your own head, to think like, oh, I need a few years to like prepare, to read books, to figure it out, to build these skills. And before you know it, you'll be 25, you'll be 30, and you're better off taking action and moving fast like you don't have time. So in a way, I'd say flip your thinking from I have time to I don't have much time and I want to get good at this really quickly and I want to build a business that's successful really, really quickly. And that's going to involve taking action, getting uncomfortable, what we spoke about, building a customer feedback loop, all of those things, and doing it, like you have a time limit in a way. And maybe create artificial pressure, create an artificial deadline. But the thing I wish I did more of in my 20s was just take more action, take more ideas out of my head into the real world, test more of them out, get feedback, build more products. Just like I sat with so much in my head because you just think like, I'm not ready, or I have more time, or I need to wait for this. I need this. No, you don't need most of those things. Just go, get action, build up your skills, and things will start to fall into place.
Wow, I mean, really, really philosophical, and it deeply resembled with me, like as you were saying that thing. What is the question I should have asked you?
What is the goal? What is the end goal? Being an entrepreneur, founding startups. I would say that's really important.
And can you answer that?
Yeah, I would say after 10 years of being a founder, if your goal is constant excitement and happiness, you're going to be disappointed. You've got to be willing to accept that it's a roller coaster. There will be moments of suffering and moments of joy. And I would say something I've learned is not to aim for happiness, because happiness is a moment. You raise 5 million, you're happy. You get your first customer, you're happy. Your important employee leaves, you're sad. You lose a customer, you're sad. You win a customer, you're happy. So happiness is a moment. It's not a state. It's better to aim for contentment or peace. So the skill as an entrepreneur is, how do you remain content and in peace when you're going through these ups and downs? right? You win a customer, you lose a customer, you hire someone, you fire someone, you raise money, you lose money. How do you maintain peace and clarity of mind and emotional stability through all of that? That, for me, is critical. If you can't do that, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be unhappy, you're probably not going to be healthy. And it's important to really, really work on that inner game. I think that's the true inner game, right? Because yes, we want to create companies because it's going to make us money, it's going to help people, it's going to create value, it's going to, we go on adventures, you have joyous moments, all of that's good. But the inner game and the mental side is how you get through every year. And I always say, if you survive this year and you survive the next year and you survive the year after that, and you keep doing that forever, you have an insane company, right? You just need to survive 1 year. And if you do that 10 times, you have a company that's 10 years old. And chances are it's going to be a massive company. So that inner game is critical. And you've got to realize that the true purpose, to be honest, is figuring out the inner game and figuring out your emotional stability, your purpose, your clarity, your contentment, your peace. Because if you don't figure that out, even if you succeed in business, you're going to go through a horrible time. And that's why there's a lot of entrepreneurs that, they go into depression after selling their business. It's crazy. You think they should be the happiest people in the world. But I know a lot of entrepreneurs that went into depression after selling their business and making a lot of money. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And also, okay, I need to hold you for one more question because you touched this. So in your latest video, or one of the latest, you mentioned about breathing. I personally enrolled in the course based on your call to action. But basically, is this one of the ways for you to control your happiness and stability? Because to me, it feels like everything is more of a psychological warfare than actual like physical threats attacking you in our current world.
Yes, your own mind is your biggest enemy. That's what you discover, right? It's very easy for something to go wrong. You lose a customer and you start to catastrophize. A lot of us will start to do that. We go, oh, we lost a customer. We're going to run out of money. All the customers are going to be unhappy now. They're going to tell their friends. The business is going to fail. This is the end of it, right? You can go from one bad thing to catastrophizing and go into panic mode, become anxious, become depressed, all of that. So breathing allows you to become aware of your thoughts. And that's where it starts. You need to control your thoughts and be like, okay, that's one customer we lost, but actually we have 10 happy customers. So things are going well. Maybe that customer is just like impossible to please. Let's focus on working on making the product better. Take their feedback if they give us the feedback. Let's work on making sure our other customers are happy, right? So you need to breathe, take a pause, become aware of your thoughts that are really negative and catastrophizing. And when you become aware of your thoughts, then you stop listening to it in a way, or you start to change it. So the reason why I recommend the art of living and breathing techniques is because breath is the easiest way to become aware of what's going on in your mind, because it just brings you back to your center. It's very hard to not be aware of your body when you start to focus on your breath. And that's really what it's about. It's being able to train yourself so that you become very present in the moment, to realize that you're becoming frustrated or angry or catastrophizing or negative, and all those bad emotions that will, very basically lead to emotional dysfunction and a lack of clarity.
Where can people find you?
So, my website has everything, Kimeshan.com, and then otherwise, social media, my YouTube channel, as well as LinkedIn.
So thank you for coming on the show. The links will be in the description.
Anytime. I really enjoyed it, and it was good having a conversation with you.